The phone rang at 9:37 on Friday night, exactly 12 hours before my sister Madison's wedding. I should have known from my mother's tone that everything was about to fall apart. Trisha, you need to apologize to Madison right now for what you did at the rehearsal dinner. You embarrassed our entire family. I could hear Madison sobbing dramatically in the background, the same fake crying she'd perfected since childhood. Mom, I told you what I saw. Madison was kissing Derek behind the venue. He's the best man and she's marrying Brandon tomorrow. The line went quiet for exactly 3 seconds before Madison's voice cut through like a blade. She's lying. Give me the phone. My mother handed it over without hesitation. Madison's voice dripped with venom. You can't come to the wedding until you say sorry. She's nothing without us. That's when I realized my family had been using me as their personal ATM for 3 years, and I was done. I had to rewind 12 hours to understand how everything unraveled so quickly. The rehearsal dinner at Riverside Country Club started perfectly normal. Madison looked radiant in her cream-colored dress. Brandon seemed genuinely happy, and our parents beamed with pride. I wore my navy blue dress and sat at the family table watching everyone celebrate what was supposed to be a joyful occasion. During the cocktail hour, I stepped outside for fresh air and witnessed something that shattered the fairy tale illusion. Behind the gazebo where the ceremony photos would be taken the next day, I saw Madison pressed against Derek, the best man, in a passionate kiss. Her hands tangled in his dark hair while his arms wrapped around her waist. This wasn't a friendly peck or accidental moment. This was a full-blown affair happening 12 hours before she promised to love and honor Brandon for the rest of her life. I stood frozen watching my sister betray everything our family claimed to value about marriage and commitment. When they finally broke apart, Madison spotted me through the decorative lattice. Instead of shame or guilt, her expression turned cold and calculating. Derek quickly walked back toward the reception while Madison approached me with the confidence of someone who had never faced real consequences. "You didn't see anything," she said, smoothing her dress and checking her lipstick. "Derek and I were just talking about tomorrow's ceremony. Brandon gets nervous, so Derek asked me to reassure him that everything would go smoothly." Her ability to lie so effortlessly while staring directly into my eyes reminded me of every time she had manipulated situations growing up. She always counted on family loyalty to cover her mistakes. But I couldn't stay silent about something this serious. During the dinner speeches, when Brandon talked about trusting Madison completely and thanking Derek for being such a loyal friend, I felt sick to my stomach. After the meal, I pulled Madison aside privately and told her she needed to tell Brandon the truth or call off the wedding. She laughed in my face. "Mind your own business, Trisha. You're just jealous because you've never had a relationship last longer than 6 months. Brandon doesn't need to know about Derek. It was just physical attraction, nothing serious." She actually seemed proud of her reasoning, as if cheating was just another wedding planning detail to manage. When I warned her that I couldn't keep this secret, Madison's expression shifted into the same manipulative mask she wore whenever she wanted something from our parents. She marched straight to Mom and Dad, tears streaming down her face, claiming I had attacked her and tried to ruin her wedding because I was bitter about being single. The entire family turned against me instantly. Uncle Frank called me aside to lecture me about supporting family during important moments. Aunt Carol wondered aloud why I would invent stories about Madison on her special weekend. Even my grandmother shook her head disappointedly, saying she expected better from me. After driving home in stunned silence, I sat in my apartment reviewing bank statements on my laptop. Something had been bothering me about our family's finances, and tonight's events made me want to understand exactly how money flowed between us. What I discovered made Madison's betrayal look like a minor infraction. For the past 8 months, automatic transfers had been moving money from my checking account to pay for wedding expenses. Flowers, catering, deposits, dress alterations, venue payments, photography packages. Everything was being charged to accounts connected to my name. The total amount reached nearly $47,000, all authorized through joint savings accounts my parents had helped me set up during college for emergency family support. But here's what really made my blood run cold. Mixed in with legitimate wedding expenses were casino charges, online gambling sites, and cash advances that had nothing to do with Madison's ceremony. Someone had been using my financial access to fund a gambling addiction, and based on the timestamps and amounts it had been going on for over 2 years. My phone buzzed with text messages from various relatives, all echoing the same theme. Support your sister. Family comes first. Don't let jealousy ruin this special day. Not one person asked for my side of the story or wondered why I would risk family relationships over something I had supposedly imagined. Around midnight, my best friend Emma knocked on my door with a bottle of wine and chocolate. She took one look at my face and knew something terrible had happened. As I explained everything from the affair to the financial discoveries, Emma listened without judgment or immediate advice. She simply validated what I was feeling. "Your family has been gaslighting you for years," she said quietly. "I've watched them dismiss your concerns, minimize your feelings, and take your generosity for granted. Tonight wasn't about protecting Madison's reputation. It was about protecting their access to your wallet." Emma helped me see patterns I had been too close to recognize. For 3 years since landing my marketing director position at Harrison Communications, I had been the family's unofficial financial safety net. Car repairs, medical bills, home improvements, Madison's graduate school tuition, even grocery money during tight weeks had all been my responsibility. I thought I was being a good daughter and sister, helping family members through temporary rough patches. Instead, I had been enabling a system where everyone else lived beyond their means, while I worked 60-hour weeks and lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment to maintain my savings account. Madison got to quit her part-time retail job to focus on wedding planning while I funded her lifestyle. My parents got to maintain their mortgage payments and social appearances, while someone else covered the gaps in their budget. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to systematically remove myself from their financial equation and see how quickly their house of cards collapsed. Not out of revenge, but out of self-preservation. I needed to understand who my family really was when they couldn't use my money to avoid consequences for their choices. Emma stayed until 3 a.m, helping me document all the unauthorized transactions and plan my next steps. We both knew that once I started pulling my financial support, there would be no going back to the old relationship dynamics. But after tonight's complete dismissal of my integrity and feelings, I realized there might not be much of value to preserve anyway. Saturday morning arrived with gray clouds and the kind of humid air that makes everyone irritable. I was supposed to be getting my hair done for Madison's wedding, but instead I sat in First National Bank at 8:15, waiting for the manager to open my case file. Jennifer Walsh, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and professional demeanor, spread my account statements across her desk like evidence in a criminal trial. "Ms. Morgan, these transactions are definitely concerning," she said, pointing to a series of charges I had never authorized. "The gambling sites alone total over $31,000 in the past 18 months. Online poker, sports, betting, casino apps all accessed through your linked accounts." My stomach dropped as the numbers became real. But the gambling charges weren't the worst discovery. Jennifer showed me a second set of transactions that revealed systematic deception spanning over 2 years. Your father has been using account access to cover significant personal debts. Credit card payments, loan installments, even his car insurance have been automatically deducted from your emergency fund. I called my father immediately, not caring about wedding day etiquette or family harmony. His voice sounded rough and tired when he answered, like he hadn't slept well either. "Dad, I'm sitting in the bank looking at $40,000 in charges I didn't make. Explain this to me right now." The silence stretched so long I thought he had hung up. Then I heard him start crying, deep, shoulder-shaking sobs that revealed years of hidden shame. "Trisha, I messed up so badly. It started with just a few dollars on basketball games, something to make watching sports more exciting. But then I started losing, and I kept thinking the next bet would win everything back." He admitted that his gambling addiction had consumed our family's financial stability over the past 2 years. The wedding expenses weren't just expensive celebration choices. They were desperate attempts to maintain appearances while their real income couldn't support basic living costs. My money had been the only thing preventing complete financial collapse. "Your mother doesn't know about most of it," he whispered. "She thinks the credit card payments are for normal household expenses. She thinks Madison's wedding is expensive because we wanted to give her something special. If you pull your support right now, everything falls apart today." That's when I understood the real reason Madison's betrayal at the rehearsal dinner had triggered such extreme family reaction. They weren't protecting her reputation or wedding day happiness. They were protecting their access to the financial support that kept their entire lifestyle functioning. My integrity was worth sacrificing to maintain their house of cards. I hung up and systematically called every vendor involved in Madison's wedding ceremony. The florist, caterer, photographer, venue coordinator, band, and cake decorator all confirmed the same pattern. Final payments were scheduled to process automatically from my accounts between 10 and 11 o'clock this morning. The wedding literally could not happen without my continued financial participation. "I need to cancel all scheduled payments effective immediately," I told each vendor. Some expressed concern about same-day cancellations, but my contracts allowed withdrawal of payment authorization with proper notice. By 10:30, every vendor had been notified that funding would not be available as planned. My phone started ringing before 11 o'clock. First Madison screaming about payment problems, then the venue coordinator confused about conflicting financial information. Then my mother demanding explanations for sabotaging the most important day of Madison's life. Each conversation revealed how little any of them understood about the practical realities of their financial situation. Madison's call was particularly enlightening. "The caterer says our payment was declined. They're threatening not to deliver food for 300 guests. She was sobbing genuine tears now, not the manipulative crying from last night. "How could you do this to me on my wedding day?" "Madison, I didn't do anything to you. I stopped doing things for you," I replied calmly. "Every vendor you're panicking about was being paid with my money, not family money. You've been planning a wedding you couldn't afford using my credit and savings to fund your fairy tale." The reality hit her like cold water. She had genuinely believed our parents were paying for everything, never questioning how they suddenly had $47,000 available for wedding expenses. She had been living in a bubble of financial ignorance while I worked overtime to maintain her illusions. Around noon, my mother arrived at my apartment building, pounding on the door with fury I hadn't seen since my teenage years. "Open this door right now, Trisha. You're destroying your sister's wedding because you're jealous and bitter." Her voice carried through the hallway, probably disturbing my neighbors who were trying to enjoy their Saturday afternoon. I opened the door to find her dressed in her mother-of-the-bride outfit, navy blue dress with matching shoes and purse, her hair perfectly styled despite the morning's chaos. But her face showed pure rage, the kind of anger that comes from desperation rather than righteousness. "Mom, come inside before you wake up the entire building," I said, stepping aside to let her enter. She marched into my living room like she owned the place, which in some ways she felt she did since my success had been supporting their lifestyle. "How dare you embarrass our family like this?" She began, her voice shaking with emotion. "Madison has been planning this wedding for 18 months. 300 guests are expecting a beautiful celebration. The vendors are calling us incompetent, and it's all because you decided to throw a tantrum over some ridiculous story about seeing things that never happened." I pulled out my laptop and bank statements, spreading them across my coffee table like Jennifer had done earlier. "Mom, look at these numbers. Really look at them. $47,000 for Madison's wedding, $31,000 in gambling charges, monthly transfers covering Dad's car payments, credit cards, even grocery money. When did I become responsible for funding everyone else's life?" Her expression shifted from anger to confusion as she processed the financial evidence. "I don't understand these gambling charges. Your father doesn't gamble. And we've been paying for Madison's wedding ourselves. We just needed temporary help with cash flow." She genuinely seemed to believe what she was saying. "Call Dad right now," I suggested. "Ask him about the online poker sites, the sports betting apps, the casino charges. Ask him how he's been making mortgage payments while being unemployed for 8 months. I watched her face change as pieces of information she hadn't connected before started forming a complete picture. The phone call lasted 12 minutes. I watched my mother's expressions cycle through disbelief, horror, anger, and finally devastation as my father admitted the full scope of his deception. Not just the gambling addiction, but the job loss, the hidden debts, the systematic use of my accounts to maintain their standard of living, while he spiraled into financial destruction. When she hung up, my mother looked 10 years older. "I had no idea," she whispered. "He told me the bank was just slow processing his retirement paperwork. He said Madison's wedding payments were coming from our savings account. I never questioned any of it because money has always been his responsibility. So, you understand why I can't keep funding this system," I said gently. "I'm not trying to hurt anyone, but I can't enable Dad's addiction or support lifestyle choices that none of you can actually afford. Today's wedding crisis is just the first consequence of living beyond your means for 2 years." She left without saying goodbye, but I could see in her eyes that our relationship had fundamentally changed. I wasn't her daughter who could be guilted into compliance anymore. I was an adult woman who had discovered uncomfortable truths about her family and chosen self-preservation over enabling their dysfunction. The rest of Saturday afternoon brought a parade of phone calls from relatives, vendors, and wedding guests, asking about ceremony changes or cancellations. Each conversation reinforced how completely my family had depended on my financial support, without ever acknowledging that dependency or expressing gratitude for the sacrifice it required. By evening, I knew there would be no simple reconciliation or return to previous family dynamics. Too much truth had been revealed, too many patterns of manipulation exposed. Whatever happened next, everyone would have to face the real consequences of their choices without using my money as a safety net. Emma brought Chinese takeout and listened to updates from the day. "Are you second-guessing your decision?" she asked, watching my face carefully. "Because if you are, that's normal. Choosing yourself over family dysfunction is incredibly difficult, even when it's the right choice." "I'm not second-guessing anything," I replied honestly. "I'm sad about losing the family relationships I thought I had, but I'm relieved to finally understand what those relationships actually were. Money changes everything, and when you're the one providing it, you never know who really cares about you versus who cares about what you can do for them. That night, I changed my phone number and set up new bank accounts with no shared access. Tomorrow would bring fresh consequences and new challenges, but for the first time in 3 years, my financial decisions would only affect my own life. The freedom felt terrifying and liberating at the same time. Sunday morning exploded into chaos before my first cup of coffee was finished brewing. My old phone, which I had kept active specifically to monitor the aftermath of yesterday's decisions, showed 31 missed calls and dozens of voicemails accumulated overnight. The desperation in those messages revealed just how much my family's world had shifted in 24 hours. Madison's voice cracked with exhaustion in her 4 a.m. voicemail. "Trisha, please call me back. The venue is threatening to cancel everything unless we pay in cash before 9 this morning. I don't understand what happened to our payment arrangements. Mom and Dad are fighting about money things I've never heard them discuss before. I just want to get married today. Please help us figure this out." But the call that changed everything came at 7:15 from a woman named Sarah Peterson. "Hi, this is Derek's wife. I think you sent me some photos last night that I needed to see. Thank you for having the courage to share the truth. I'm handling this situation personally, and Derek won't be participating in today's wedding ceremony." I had sent those photos to Sarah after researching Derek's background online. Finding his wife's contact information took less than 20 minutes of searching social media and public records. The pictures clearly showed Derek and Madison's affair behind the gazebo, captured on my phone when I witnessed their betrayal Friday night. I knew Sarah deserved to understand what kind of man she was married to, just like Brandon deserved to know who he was about to marry. By 8:30, the wedding venue had become a battlefield of conflicting emotions and financial panic. According to my Uncle Marcus, who called to give me updates, vendors were demanding cash payments while family members scrambled to understand their suddenly complicated financial situation. Nobody had backup plans because everyone assumed I would eventually relent and restore funding. "Your parents are in complete meltdown mode," Marcus explained. "Your father finally admitted everything to your mother this morning. The gambling, the job loss, the hidden debts, all of it. She's devastated and furious, but also terrified about losing their house. Meanwhile, Madison keeps insisting this is all your fault for lying about what you saw Friday night." Then Sarah Peterson arrived at Riverside Country Club with printed copies of the affair photos. The confrontation happened in front of the entire wedding party while they were getting ready for the ceremony. Sarah walked into the bridal suite where Madison was having final touch-ups on her makeup and hair. Bridesmaids were adjusting dresses, and the photographer was capturing getting ready moments when Sarah quietly placed the evidence on the vanity table. "Madison, I think we need to discuss these pictures before you marry Brandon," Sarah said calmly. "My husband Derek explained that you two have been having an affair for the past 3 months. He also mentioned that you've been planning to continue the relationship after your marriage." Madison's face went completely white as she stared at photos showing her kissing Derek passionately, her wedding rings visible as her hands touched his face. The bridesmaids gasped, the photographer stopped shooting, and Madison's carefully crafted wedding day persona crumbled in real time. "Those photos are fake," Madison stammered, but her voice lacked conviction. "Someone edited them to make it look like Derek and I were doing something inappropriate. This is just another attempt by my sister to ruin my wedding because she's jealous of my happiness." Sarah's response was devastating. "Madison Derek confessed everything this morning when I showed him these pictures. He admitted the affair started 3 months ago at your engagement party. He said you told him that marriage to Brandon was just for financial security, but you planned to maintain your relationship with Derek after the ceremony." The room erupted into chaos. bridesmaids started arguing among themselves about what they had suspected or witnessed. Madison's maid of honor admitted she had questioned Madison's behavior, but stayed quiet to avoid drama. The photographer awkwardly packed up equipment while the hairstylist stood frozen with a curling iron in her hand. But the real explosion happened when Brandon arrived at the bridal suite looking for Madison to give her a pre-ceremony gift. He walked into the middle of Sarah's revelation and saw the photos spread across the vanity. His expression shifted from confusion to heartbreak to pure rage in the span of 30 seconds. "Is this real?" he asked Madison directly, holding up one of the clearer pictures. "Have you been cheating on me with my best man?" His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking as he processed the visual evidence of betrayal. Madison tried one final lie. "Brandon, you know me better than this. Someone is trying to destroy our wedding day by creating fake evidence. Derek is your friend. He would never do something like this to you, and I love you. I would never hurt you this way." But Sarah had more evidence than just photos. Brandon Derek showed me text messages between them discussing hotel reservations for next weekend planned as their first getaway after your honeymoon. He also mentioned that Madison helped him choose an anniversary gift for me last month, something they apparently found hilarious because it was so ironic. That's when Brandon made the decision that saved himself from years of deception. "The wedding is canceled," he announced to everyone in the room. "I won't marry someone who has been lying to me for months and planning to continue lying after we're married. Madison, whatever financial problems your family is having, they're not my responsibility anymore." He removed his boutonniere, handed it to the maid of honor, and walked out of the bridal suite. The sound of the door closing echoed through the room like a gavel ending a court case. Within an hour, 300 wedding guests were milling around the venue lobby, while family members tried to decide whether to salvage anything from the day. The vendors were demanding immediate payment regardless of whether the ceremony proceeded. The photographer wanted to know if anyone still needed his services. The caterer had already prepared food for the reception and expected compensation for their work. My phone rang constantly with updates from various relatives. Some blamed me for destroying Madison's happiness. Others admitted they had suspected problems, but avoided getting involved. Uncle Marcus defended my actions, pointing out that I had tried to handle the situation privately before resorting to exposing the truth publicly. Madison brought this on herself, he told me during one of our conversations. "You gave her the opportunity to be honest with Brandon on Friday night. She chose deception instead, and Derek's wife deserved to know what was happening. Sometimes the truth hurts, but lies hurt more in the long run." The most revealing call came from my grandmother, Nana Rose, who had been quietly observing family dynamics from her retirement community. "Trisha, dear, I've been watching your family's money problems for months without saying anything. I knew your father was gambling again, just like he did 20 years ago when you were in high school. I knew your mother was drinking more than usual and missing work. And I knew Madison was taking advantage of your generosity without appreciating the sacrifice you were making." "Why didn't you say something sooner?" I asked, surprised by her level of awareness. "Because adults have to learn from their own mistakes," she replied wisely. "I couldn't protect them from consequences forever, and I couldn't keep enabling destructive behavior just because we're family. You did the right thing by stepping back and forcing everyone to face reality." That afternoon, Madison appeared at my apartment still wearing her wedding dress makeup streaked with tears and her hair falling out of its elaborate style. She looked like a ghost of the confident bride she had planned to be 12 hours earlier. "Madison, I didn't destroy your life," I replied quietly. "I stopped participating in the lies that were destroying mine. You chose to have an affair with Derek. You chose to lie to Brandon about it. You chose to plan a wedding you couldn't afford. And you chose to use emotional manipulation instead of taking responsibility for any of those choices. She pushed past me into my apartment, her dress train dragging across my hardwood floor. You don't understand what it's like to be under this kind of pressure. Everyone expects me to be perfect, to have the perfect relationship, and the perfect wedding, and the perfect life. Derek understood me in ways that Brandon never could. The affair wasn't about hurting anyone. It was about feeling connected to someone who really saw me. But you were planning to continue the affair after marrying Brandon, I pointed out. Sarah said Derek had evidence of future plans. So this wasn't about feeling misunderstood or finding connection. This was about wanting financial security from Brandon while getting emotional satisfaction from Derek. Madison collapsed onto my couch, her wedding dress spreading around her like a deflated parachute. For the first time in our adult relationship, she looked vulnerable instead of manipulative. I don't know how to pay for anything without help, she admitted. I've never had to budget or save money or make financial decisions. Mom and Dad always handled everything, and when they couldn't, you stepped in. I thought marriage to Brandon would solve the money problems forever. So, you were using him? I said, understanding finally clicking into place. Brandon wasn't the love of your life. He was your financial plan. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I do care about him, but Derek made me feel alive in ways that Brandon never could. I thought I could have both the security and the passion. I thought if I was careful, no one would ever know, and everyone would be happy. That's when I realized Madison wasn't just selfish or manipulative. She was completely unprepared for adult life because our family had never required her to develop independence or face consequences. She had been protected and enabled since childhood, never learning that actions have results or that other people's feelings matter as much as her own comfort. Madison, you need to learn how to take care of yourself, I told her gently. Not just financially, but emotionally. You need to understand that relationships require honesty and commitment, not just taking what you want from different people. And you need to figure out who you really are when you're not trying to manipulate situations to avoid discomfort. She left my apartment that evening still wearing her wedding dress, but something in her expression had shifted. The entitled anger was gone, replaced by confusion and fear about facing reality without family financial support or marriage as an escape route. Later that night, I realized the day's events had been necessary for everyone's growth, not just mine. Madison needed to understand the consequences of dishonesty. Brandon needed to escape a marriage built on deception. Derek's wife needed to know the truth about her husband, and my parents needed to face their financial problems without using my money as a Band-Aid solution. Sometimes love means allowing people to experience the results of their choices, even when those results are painful, especially when those results are painful. Tuesday morning brought a phone call that revealed the true scope of my family's financial house of cards. Jennifer Walsh from First National Bank called at 8:45 with information that made Sunday's wedding disaster look like a minor inconvenience. Ms. Morgan, we need to discuss your parents' mortgage situation, she said in the carefully neutral tone that bank professionals use when delivering devastating news. Your automatic payment authorization has been covering their monthly house payments for the past 8 months. Without that support, they're facing foreclosure proceedings within 30 days. The number hit me like a physical blow. $1,867 every month for 8 months meant I had unknowingly paid nearly $15,000 just to keep my parents' house out of foreclosure. Combined with all the other financial support I had been providing, my family had been living completely beyond their means while I worked overtime and lived modestly to maintain their lifestyle. How is this possible? I asked Jennifer. I never authorized mortgage payments. I only agreed to help with emergency expenses and Madison's wedding costs. The payments were processed through your emergency family fund using the same joint account access that covered other expenses, she explained. Your father has signature authority on that account from when you established it during college. Legally, he had the right to authorize transactions for family emergencies, and apparently he classified the mortgage payments as emergency family support. I called my father immediately, not caring about his emotional state or the family crisis atmosphere that had dominated since Sunday's wedding disaster. His voice sounded hollow when he answered like he had aged 10 years in 3 days. Dad, I just learned that you've been using my money to make mortgage payments for 8 months. 8 months of house payments that I never knew about. How could you justify that without telling me? The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if he had hung up. Then I heard him crying again, the same broken sobs from Saturday morning, but deeper now, more desperate. Trisha, I lost my job in March. Not retired, fired. The company discovered I had been gambling during work hours using company computers to access betting sites. They gave me a choice between termination with cause or resignation with minimal severance. This was news that explained so many confusing pieces of our family's financial puzzle. So you've been unemployed for 9 months while telling everyone you took early retirement? I was too ashamed to admit what really happened, he whispered. Your mother thought I was getting pension payments and Social Security early. She thought my reduced income was just temporary until all the paperwork processed. I kept telling myself I would get another job quickly and pay back everything before anyone discovered the truth. But unemployment wasn't his only secret. Over the next 20 minutes, my father revealed the complete scope of financial deception that had been consuming our family's stability. The gambling addiction had started 3 years ago with small sports bets, but escalated when he began trying to win back losses. By the time he lost his job, he owed over $43,000 to various creditors and had exhausted their savings account completely. Your mother doesn't know about the credit card debts, he admitted. She thinks our financial problems started when I lost my job, but really they started when I started gambling. I've been juggling minimum payments and hoping for a big win to solve everything. My mother came on the line, and I could tell from her voice that she had been drinking. Not falling down drunk, but enough wine to blur the edges of her overwhelming situation. Trisha, your father just told me about the mortgage payments. We had no idea you were covering our house. We thought the bank was just being patient while his retirement benefits processed. Mom, how long has Dad been drinking more than usual? I asked directly. What do you mean? She replied, but her defensive tone revealed that she knew exactly what I meant. I mean the wine bottles in your recycling, the slurred speech during evening phone calls, the missed work days that you blamed on migraines. How long have you been using alcohol to cope with stress instead of facing problems directly? Another long silence before she answered. Since your father started acting strange about money last year. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't want to ask questions because I was afraid of the answers. Drinking helped me sleep and stopped me from worrying about things I couldn't control. So both of my parents had been using addictive behaviors to avoid dealing with their financial crisis, while my money provided just enough support to delay complete collapse. They had been functioning alcoholics and gambling addicts respectively, while I believed I was helping them through temporary rough patches. Wednesday afternoon brought a surprise visit from Madison, who looked completely different than she had Sunday night. Gone was the wedding dress and dramatic makeup. She wore jeans, a simple t-shirt, and her hair in a ponytail. She looked younger, but also more defeated than I had ever seen her. I moved back in with Mom and Dad, she announced when I opened the door. Brandon changed the locks on our apartment and moved all my stuff to the garage. His lawyer sent a letter saying I have no claim to anything we bought together since I committed adultery. Madison had been living with Brandon for 6 months before the wedding, contributing nothing financially, but enjoying the benefits of his software engineer salary and downtown apartment. Without that support or our family's financial backing, she was discovering what independence actually required. "How are you planning to pay for things now?" I asked, genuinely curious about her practical plans. "I don't know," she admitted, sitting heavily on my couch. "I haven't worked since I quit the boutique job 8 months ago to plan the wedding. I don't have savings or credit cards in my own name. I thought marriage would solve all the money problems, and when that fell apart, I assumed you would help me figure things out." "Madison, I can't help you figure anything out until you take responsibility for the choices that created this situation," I said gently. "You chose to quit your job without savings. You chose to have an affair instead of ending your engagement honestly. You chose to plan a wedding you couldn't afford. And you chose to manipulate family members instead of having honest conversations about money." She looked at me with genuine confusion, as if the concept of personal responsibility was foreign to her experience. "But family is supposed to help each other during difficult times. You have a good job and savings. Mom and Dad need help with their house payments. I need help getting back on my feet. Isn't that what families do?" "Healthy families help each other through temporary crises," I explained. "They don't enable each other's poor choices or use guilt and manipulation to avoid consequences. Real help sometimes means allowing people to experience the results of their decisions so they can learn and grow." That evening, I drove to my childhood home to collect some personal belongings and saw the physical evidence of our family's deteriorating situation. The yard needed mowing, the paint on the front porch was peeling, and my father's car had a cracked windshield that hadn't been repaired. Inside the house felt tense and uncomfortable, like a family holding its breath, waiting for the next crisis. My mother greeted me with hollow eyes and a forced smile that didn't hide her exhaustion. "We're trying to figure out how to manage everything without depending on your support," she said, her words carefully chosen. "Your father applied for 3 jobs this week, and I'm looking into going back to work full-time instead of part-time." But walking through the house revealed details that showed how much they had been struggling even with my financial help. The refrigerator was nearly empty. Bills were stacked on the kitchen counter in piles that suggested overwhelming debt. Madison's belongings were scattered through the living room and dining room, making the space feel cramped and chaotic. "How long has Mom been drinking every day?" I asked my father privately when my mother went upstairs to get my photo albums. "Since last summer," he admitted. "It started as wine with dinner to help her relax after work, but gradually became wine during dinner preparation, then wine in the afternoon to cope with stress. She's not falling down drunk, but she's definitely using alcohol to manage emotions instead of dealing with problems. And how long have you known that your gambling addiction was destroying our family's financial stability?" "I've known it was a problem for over a year," he said quietly. "But I kept thinking the next bet would solve everything. I kept believing I could win back the losses and pay off the debts and return to normal without anyone knowing how bad things had gotten. Admitting the truth meant facing consequences I wasn't ready to handle." My grandmother called that night with perspective that helped me understand the larger patterns affecting our family. "Trisha, your parents have been avoiding adult responsibilities for so long that they forgot how to function independently. Your financial support allowed them to maintain appearances while their problems got worse instead of better." "But shouldn't family help each other?" I asked, echoing Madison's question from earlier. "Real help requires the person receiving support to take action toward solving their problems," Nana Rose replied wisely. "When help becomes enabling, it stops being helpful and starts being harmful. Your parents needed to face their addictions and financial irresponsibility years ago, but your money made it possible for them to delay those consequences. Thursday brought news that confirmed my decision to withdraw financial support had been necessary for everyone's long-term well-being. The foreclosure notice forced my parents to have honest conversations about their situation for the first time in over 2 years. My father enrolled in gambling addiction counseling and started applying for jobs that matched his actual qualifications instead of his preferred lifestyle. My mother admitted her drinking had become problematic and scheduled an appointment with her doctor to discuss treatment options. Madison applied for 3 retail positions and discovered that quitting her previous job without notice had damaged her employment references. She was learning that choices have consequences and that rebuilding professional reputation requires time and consistent effort. For the first time since college, my family members were facing their problems directly instead of using my money as a safety net that allowed them to avoid uncomfortable truths. The process was painful for everyone, but it was also the beginning of real healing and growth. That night, I realized that my decision to withdraw financial support hadn't been cruel or selfish. It had been the most loving thing I could do for people who had forgotten how to take care of themselves. 2 weeks after Madison's canceled wedding, my phone buzzed with an automated credit alert that made my stomach drop. New account opened in your name, Capital One Visa. Credit limit $10,000 approved yesterday. I had never applied for this credit card or authorized anyone else to use my personal information for financial applications. I immediately called Capital One's fraud prevention hotline and spent 45 minutes verifying my identity while reviewing the suspicious account details. The application had been submitted online using my social security number, birth date, and current address, but the email address and phone number belonged to someone else. Most disturbing, the card had been expedited for delivery to a post office box that I had never rented. "Ma'am, this appears to be identity theft," explained Carlos Martinez, the fraud specialist assigned to my case. The application was approved because all the personal information matched your credit file exactly. However, the delivery address and contact information suggest someone with access to your private data submitted this application without your knowledge. Within hours, I discovered this wasn't an isolated incident. My credit report showed 3 additional accounts opened in my name. Over the past 6 months, a department store card with a $5,000 limit, a personal loan for $8,000, and a gas station credit card. Total fraudulent debt exceeded $23,000, all authorized using my identity, but controlled by someone else. The investigation led me to a shocking realization about Madison's spending patterns and financial desperation. The department store card had been used exclusively for wedding-related purchases, shoes, jewelry, lingerie, and beauty treatments that I had assumed she was paying for independently. The personal loan had been deposited into an account that Madison controlled supposedly for emergency wedding expenses that our parents couldn't cover. I called Detective Rodriguez from the County Fraud Division and filed a formal police report Thursday morning. Maria Rodriguez was a woman in her 30s with sharp eyes and the kind of professional demeanor that immediately put me at ease about pursuing criminal charges against family members. Ms. Morgan, identity theft by family members is more common than people realize, she explained as we reviewed the evidence. The perpetrator has easy access to personal information, knows the victim's financial habits, and often feels entitled to shared family resources. In many cases, they convince themselves they're borrowing money they'll eventually pay back. "But how did Madison get all my personal information?" I asked, still struggling to understand the mechanics of her deception. Family members often have access to social security numbers, birth dates, and address history through shared documents, tax filings, and emergency contact forms. Detective Rodriguez explained. If she had ever helped you with paperwork or been present during financial conversations, she could have easily collected everything needed for credit applications. The investigation revealed a pattern of systematic financial exploitation that went beyond impulsive wedding expenses. Madison had been researching my credit score and financial accounts for months, carefully timing her fraudulent applications to avoid triggering immediate security alerts. She had even called my employer pretending to be me requesting salary verification for what she claimed was a mortgage application. This level of planning and deception suggests your sister saw you as a financial resource rather than a family member, Detective Rodriguez observed. The emotional manipulation around the wedding was likely designed to distract you from noticing the financial irregularities until after she had accessed as much credit as possible. Friday afternoon brought another disturbing discovery when my cousin Jessica called with information that expanded the scope of Madison's fraudulent activities. Jessica lived in Portland and had limited contact with our immediate family, but she had received suspicious calls asking for financial support based on false information about family emergencies. Madison called me 3 months ago claiming that you were in the hospital with complications from a car accident, Jessica explained. She said the family needed $5,000 immediately for medical expenses not covered by insurance. She knew specific details about your life and job that made the story believable, so I wired the money to an account she provided. Jessica had sent similar amounts on 2 other occasions responding to fabricated crises involving our grandmother's health and my father's supposed heart attack. Madison had collected over $12,000 from various extended family members using emotional manipulation and completely fictional emergencies. I feel so stupid for believing her, Jessica said, her voice tight with anger and embarrassment. But she had details about everyone's lives that made the stories seem legitimate. She knew where you worked, where Nana Rose lived, even specific information about Dad's medical history that gave her lies credibility. Jessica, you're not stupid, I assured her. Madison had access to real family information that she used to make fictional stories believable. This was sophisticated emotional manipulation designed to exploit your caring nature and family loyalty. Detective Rodriguez was fascinated by this new information because it demonstrated a broader pattern of fraud that crossed state lines and involved multiple victims. Your sister was running what amounts to a family-based financial scam, she explained. She used legitimate family connections to establish credibility, then fabricated emergencies to extract money from relatives who trusted her but couldn't easily verify the situations. By the following Monday, our investigation had uncovered enough evidence to support multiple felony charges against Madison for identity theft, credit card fraud, and wire fraud. Detective Rodriguez assembled a comprehensive case file that included bank records, phone logs, email evidence, and victim statements from 4 different family members who had been deceived. Ms. Morgan, I need you to understand that pursuing criminal charges will permanently change your family relationships, she warned me during our final evidence review meeting. Your sister could face up to 5 years in prison and substantial fines. Your parents may blame you for destroying Madison's future instead of recognizing her responsibility for these choices. Detective Rodriguez, my family relationships were already destroyed by years of financial manipulation and emotional abuse. I replied honestly. Madison didn't just steal money from me. She violated my identity, exploited family trust, and deceived relatives who genuinely cared about our family's well-being. Those actions have consequences regardless of our biological connection. That week, I also started therapy with Dr. Patricia Henley, a psychologist who specialized in family financial abuse and boundary-setting issues. Dr. Henley helped me understand that Madison's behavior represented a pattern of exploitation that had been enabled by family dynamics for years. Trisha, your family created a system where Madison never faced consequences for manipulative behavior, Dr. Henley explained during our first session. When someone grows up believing that family members exist to solve their problems and fund their lifestyle, they often develop narcissistic tendencies and lose the ability to form genuine emotional connections. But how did I not see this pattern earlier? I asked, still struggling with feelings of guilt and self-doubt. Family systems are incredibly powerful, she replied. When you're inside a dysfunctional dynamic, it's difficult to recognize manipulation because it's presented as normal family support. Your parents trained you from childhood to prioritize Madison's needs over your own feelings, which made you vulnerable to continued exploitation as an adult. Through therapy, I began to understand that my decision to withdraw financial support and pursue criminal charges wasn't an overreaction to wedding drama. It was a necessary response to years of systematic abuse that had escalated to criminal behavior. Madison's identity theft represented the inevitable conclusion of entitlement and manipulation that had never been challenged or corrected. My former high school friend David Chen, now a successful attorney specializing in white-collar crime, offered to help with the legal proceedings pro bono. David had watched our family dynamics during high school and wasn't surprised by Madison's fraudulent behavior. Trisha, I remember Madison manipulating situations to get what she wanted even as a teenager, he told me during our consultation meeting. She would create dramatic stories to avoid consequences for missing assignments or breaking rules. The identity theft is just an adult version of manipulation tactics she's been using for years. David helped me understand the legal process and prepare for family backlash when criminal charges were formally filed. Your parents will likely try to convince you to drop the charges to protect Madison from prison time, he warned. They may offer to pay restitution or promise that Madison will get help for her behavior. But financial fraud is a serious crime that affects your credit history and financial security for years. By the end of that week, I had filed formal complaints with 3 credit card companies, reported the fraudulent accounts to all 3 credit bureaus, and provided Detective Rodriguez with everything needed to pursue criminal charges. The investigation had revealed that Madison's financial exploitation of our family was far more extensive and intentional than anyone had realized. Most importantly, I finally understood that my guilt and confusion about pursuing legal action were symptoms of the emotional manipulation I had been subjected to for years. Healthy families don't steal each other's identities or exploit financial trust. Madison's behavior was criminal, not just selfish, and treating it as a family matter instead of a legal issue would enable continued abuse. The evidence was overwhelming. The victims were real, and the consequences were necessary for everyone's protection and healing. 3 months after Madison's canceled wedding, the courthouse steps felt like the most important place I had ever stood. Detective Rodriguez had built an airtight case against Madison for identity theft, credit card fraud, and wire fraud affecting multiple victims across 2 states. As I walked toward the entrance for the preliminary hearing, I knew that today would either bring justice and closure or tear our family apart beyond any possibility of repair. Madison sat at the defendant's table wearing a conservative navy dress and looking smaller than I had ever seen her. Her lawyer, a public defender named Robert Fitzgerald, had advised her to plead guilty to reduced charges in exchange for community service and full restitution payments. But Madison had refused the plea deal, insisting that family financial support couldn't be classified as theft. Your Honor, My client maintains that she believed she had implicit permission to access family financial resources during a time of extreme stress and financial crisis. Fitzgerald argued during opening statements. The defendant was planning a wedding while dealing with family addiction issues and financial instability. Her actions, while legally questionable, were motivated by desperation rather than criminal intent. District Attorney Sarah Kim presented a very different narrative supported by months of investigation and evidence gathering. Your Honor, the defendant engaged in a systematic pattern of identity theft and fraud spanning over 6 months. She opened multiple credit accounts using her sister's personal information, collected over $12,000 from relatives using fabricated emergency stories, and showed sophisticated planning and premeditation in her criminal activities. The prosecution's evidence was devastating and comprehensive. Credit card applications with forged signatures, email records showing Madison researching my financial accounts and credit history, bank surveillance footage of Madison using fake identification to access accounts, phone logs proving she had called relatives with false emergency stories designed to extract money through emotional manipulation. But the most damaging evidence came from Madison's own text messages and social media posts, which revealed her true attitude toward the family members she was defrauding. "Trisha is so gullible about family loyalty," read one message to her friend Ashley. "She'll never notice a few extra charges mixed in with legitimate wedding expenses." Another text message to Derek sent 2 weeks before the wedding was particularly revealing. "Once I'm married to Brandon, I won't need Trisha's money anymore. She can stop playing victim about supporting the family and find her own life." Jessica testified via video conference from Portland about the false emergency calls and wire transfers Madison had requested. She described Trisha's supposed car accident in such detail that I could visualize the hospital room and medical equipment. She knew that I worked in healthcare, so she used medical terminology correctly to make the story believable. I never questioned whether the emergency was real because Madison seemed so genuinely upset and desperate. Uncle Marcus testified about Madison's manipulation tactics during family gatherings. She would create dramatic stories about financial stress to make everyone feel guilty about enjoying themselves. Then she would privately ask different family members for money, telling each person that they were the only one she trusted with her problems. She was playing us against each other while collecting money from multiple sources. The most powerful testimony came from my father, who had agreed to testify for the prosecution as part of his own accountability process in gambling addiction recovery. Madison knew about my gambling debts and used that information to justify her fraudulent activities, he explained to the court. She told me that she was protecting the family from embarrassment by handling financial problems privately. I was so ashamed of my addiction that I didn't ask questions about where money was coming from. "Mr. Morgan, did your daughter Madison ever discuss her intention to repay the money she obtained through fraudulent means?" D.A. Kim asked. "No," my father replied quietly. "In fact, she told me that Trisha owed the family financial support because she had benefited from our love and sacrifice during her childhood. Madison believed she was collecting money that already belonged to her in some way. When I testified about discovering the identity theft and credit card fraud, I focused on the practical impact rather than emotional damage. Your Honor, Madison's actions affected my credit score, my financial security, and my ability to trust any family member with personal information. The fraudulent accounts continue to appear on my credit report despite being reported as stolen identity. This will impact my ability to get loans, mortgages, and even job opportunities for years." Madison's testimony was a disaster for her defense case. Instead of showing remorse or taking responsibility, she continued to justify her actions and blame other family members for creating the circumstances that led to her criminal behavior. I was under incredible pressure to have a perfect wedding while dealing with my father's gambling addiction and my mother's drinking problem, she told the court. Trisha had more money than she needed, and I thought she would eventually understand that family members should support each other during difficult times. I never intended to permanently keep money that didn't belong to me. Ms. Madison Morgan, did you ask your sister's permission before opening credit cards in her name? D.A. Kim asked during cross-examination. No, but I knew she would have said yes if I had asked, Madison replied, apparently believing this logic made sense. Did you ask permission before telling relatives false stories about family emergencies to collect money? Those weren't completely false stories. Our family was having financial emergencies, just not the specific emergencies I described. Judge Patricia Harrison grew visibly impatient with Madison's continued refusal to accept responsibility for criminal behavior. Ms. Morgan, do you understand that using someone else's identity to obtain credit is a felony, regardless of your relationship to that person? Yes, Your Honor, but family relationships should be considered when determining criminal intent. Madison replied, still not grasping the seriousness of her situation. The trial lasted 3 days, but the verdict was delivered in less than 2 hours. Madison was found guilty on all charges, 2 counts of identity theft, 4 counts of credit card fraud, and 3 counts of wire fraud. Judge Harrison sentenced her to 18 months of supervised probation, 400 hours of community service, and full restitution to all victims totaling over $35,000. Ms. Madison Morgan, your actions represent a serious violation of trust that extends far beyond typical family financial disputes, Judge Harrison stated during sentencing. You engaged in sophisticated criminal behavior that harmed multiple victims and demonstrated a concerning lack of empathy for the people you claim to love. The court hopes that the consequences of today's proceedings will motivate you to develop healthier relationship patterns and respect for other people's financial autonomy. Outside the courthouse, the family gathering was unlike anything I had experienced before. Extended relatives who had been manipulated by Madison approached me with apologies and support. Cousin Jessica had flown in from Portland specifically to witness the verdict and express her gratitude for my courage in pursuing criminal charges. Trisha, thank you for stopping this pattern before it got even worse, she said, hugging me tightly. I've been researching financial abuse since discovering Madison's lies, and I learned that this type of behavior typically escalates until someone sets firm boundaries. You probably prevented years of additional fraud and manipulation. Uncle Marcus organized an impromptu family meeting at a nearby coffee shop where several relatives shared their own experiences with Madison's manipulation tactics over the years. Aunt Carol admitted that Madison had borrowed money for a medical emergency that never actually happened. Cousin Tom revealed that Madison had used emotional manipulation to get free car repairs and household services by creating elaborate stories about family financial crises. We all enabled her behavior because we thought family loyalty meant believing whatever story she told us, Uncle Marcus observed. But real family loyalty means holding each other accountable for harmful actions, even when that accountability is uncomfortable. My parents attended the family meeting but remained quiet throughout most of the discussion. My father looked older and more defeated than I had ever seen him, while my mother appeared to be processing information that challenged everything she believed about Madison's character and our family dynamics. I don't understand how we missed so many red flags, my mother said finally. Madison always seemed like the victim in every situation, always struggling with problems that weren't her fault. I thought I was being a supportive mother by believing her stories and providing whatever help I could. Mom Madison is an expert at creating believable narratives that cast her as the victim while portraying other people as responsible for solving her problems, I explained gently. She's been practicing these manipulation techniques since childhood, and she got better at them as she got older. None of us were equipped to recognize sophisticated emotional manipulation from someone we loved. Dr. Henley had prepared me for this moment, explaining that family members would likely cycle through denial, anger, bargaining, and acceptance when confronted with evidence of systematic manipulation. Some relatives would immediately understand and support my decision to pursue criminal charges, while others would struggle with guilt and confusion about enabling Madison's behavior for years. The most surprising support came from Nana Rose, who had driven 3 hours from her retirement community to attend the trial proceedings. Tricia, I've been watching this family enable Madison's entitlement and manipulation for over 20 years, she told me privately after the family meeting. Your decision to pursue legal consequences was the first time anyone held her accountable for harmful behavior. I'm proud of you for having the courage to break this destructive pattern. That evening, I received a phone call from Brandon Madison's former fiancé, who had been following the trial proceedings through mutual friends. Tricia, I wanted to thank you for exposing Madison's fraud before I married her, he said. My lawyer discovered that she had attempted to add herself to my bank accounts and credit cards without my knowledge during our engagement. If we had gotten married, I could have been financially liable for her fraudulent activities. Brandon, I'm sorry you had to learn about Madison's character this way, I replied honestly. But I'm glad you discovered the truth before making a legal commitment that would have given her even more access to exploit your trust and financial resources. Detective Rodriguez told me that Madison had researched divorce laws and asset division before our wedding, he revealed. She wasn't planning a marriage built on love and partnership. She was planning a financial arrangement that would give her access to my income and credit while maintaining her freedom to pursue other relationships. By the end of that week, I realized that Madison's criminal conviction had actually healed our extended family by exposing and stopping patterns of manipulation that had been damaging relationships for years. Relatives who had been isolated by Madison's divide-and-conquer tactics reconnected with each other and shared stories that revealed the scope of her emotional and financial exploitation. Most importantly, the legal consequences forced Madison to begin taking responsibility for her actions and their impact on other people. Community service requirements connected her with social workers who specialized in helping people develop healthy relationship skills and financial independence. For the first time in our adult relationship, I felt hopeful that Madison might eventually learn to form genuine connections based on mutual respect, rather than manipulation and exploitation. 6 months after Madison's sentencing, I stood on the balcony of my new apartment in Denver, watching the sunrise over the Rocky Mountains and reflecting on the incredible transformation my life had undergone. The promotion to regional marketing director had come with a substantial salary increase, the opportunity to relocate to a city I had always loved, and most importantly, the chance to build a life based on my own choices rather than family obligations and guilt. My apartment was small, but perfectly suited to my needs, with exposed brick walls, hardwood floors, and large windows that filled every room with natural light. For the first time since college, my living space reflected my personality and preferences rather than budget limitations caused by supporting other people's financial emergencies. The job at Harrison Communications' Denver office challenged me in ways that reminded me why I had chosen marketing as a career. Working with clients who valued creativity and strategic thinking, collaborating with colleagues who respected professional boundaries, and contributing to projects that had measurable impact on business success all felt like luxurious gifts after years of workplace stress compounded by family financial drama. But the most significant change in my life was my relationship with Michael Torres, a thoughtful man I had met through a hiking club during my second month in Denver. Michael was a renewable energy engineer who shared my love of outdoor activities and intellectual conversations. More importantly, he respected my independence and emotional boundaries in ways that felt revolutionary after years of family manipulation. "I admire how you rebuilt your life after discovering your family's financial abuse," he told me during one of our weekend camping trips to Rocky Mountain National Park. "It takes incredible strength to prioritize your own well-being when everyone around you is demanding that you continue enabling their dysfunction." Michael had experienced his own family boundary-setting challenges, which made him uniquely understanding about the guilt and confusion that comes with choosing personal health over family loyalty. My brother struggled with addiction for years, and my parents kept asking me to provide money that enabled his drug use instead of motivating him to seek treatment. He shared, "Learning to say no felt cruel, but it was actually the most loving thing I could do for everyone involved." Dating someone who understood healthy relationship dynamics and respected financial independence felt like discovering a language I hadn't known existed. Michael never made assumptions about shared expenses or future plans. He never tried to guilt me into decisions through emotional manipulation. He never treated my success or stability as resources he was entitled to access. Instead, he celebrated my achievements, supported my goals, and created space for me to continue healing from years of family trauma without pressuring me to get over it or reconcile prematurely. My relationship with extended family had also evolved in unexpected and healing ways. Cousin Jessica and I had become genuinely close friends, connecting regularly through video calls and visits that were based on mutual affection rather than crisis management. Uncle Marcus had become a trusted advisor who helped me understand family patterns and dynamics from a healthier perspective. "Trisha, you've given all of us permission to set boundaries with manipulative behavior," he explained during one of our monthly phone conversations. "Before you stood up to Madison and your parents, everyone felt obligated to enable dysfunction because we thought that's what family loyalty required. Now we understand that real love sometimes means refusing to participate in harmful patterns." Nana Rose and I had developed a special weekly tradition of Sunday afternoon phone calls where we discussed everything from current events to family history to her experiences in assisted living. She had become my role model for aging with dignity, wisdom, and clear boundaries about what behavior she would and wouldn't tolerate from family members. "Your grandmother taught me that love doesn't require tolerating disrespect or abuse," Nana Rose shared during one particularly meaningful conversation. "She used to say that people will treat you exactly as badly as you allow them to treat you, and that enabling someone's worst behavior isn't kindness, it's cowardice." Madison's progress through community service and court-mandated counseling had been slower but more genuine than anyone expected. 3 months into her sentence, she called to offer what sounded like a sincere apology for the identity theft and financial fraud. "Trisha, I want you to know that I understand now how much damage I caused to your credit, your trust, and your emotional well-being," she said during a carefully worded voicemail message. "The counseling sessions have helped me recognize manipulation tactics I learned in childhood, and I'm working on developing healthier ways to handle stress and financial problems. Madison was working full-time at a retail position for the first time in her adult life, learning to budget her income and pay her own expenses without family financial support. The community service requirement had connected her with social workers who specialized in helping young adults develop independence and accountability skills. I never learned how to solve problems without manipulating other people into solving them for me, she admitted during our first supervised phone conversation since the trial. The counselors are teaching me that genuine relationships require honesty, respect, and reciprocity instead of constant crisis and emotional drama. Most surprisingly, Madison had started dating someone she met through her community service volunteer work. James was a social worker who had his own experience with family addiction issues and boundary-setting challenges. Unlike her previous relationships based on financial security or physical attraction, this connection seemed built on mutual understanding and emotional growth. James won't tolerate manipulation or dishonesty, Madison shared during one of our monthly check-in calls. He's teaching me what healthy communication looks like and how to ask for support without creating emergencies or guilt trips. It's completely different from any relationship I've had before. My parents' transformation had been perhaps the most dramatic and encouraging development of the entire experience. My father's gambling addiction recovery through Gamblers Anonymous had given him tools for managing stress and making financial decisions based on reality rather than fantasy. He had found steady employment as a customer service supervisor and was making consistent payments toward the restitution he owed for his role in enabling Madison's fraud. My mother had completed alcohol addiction treatment and was approaching 8 months of sobriety. More importantly, she had started attending Al-Anon meetings that helped her understand enabling behaviors and codependency patterns that had characterized her relationships with both my father and Madison. Trisha, I owe you an apology that goes far beyond the financial manipulation, she said during a heartfelt conversation that marked our first direct communication since the trial. I taught Madison that emotional manipulation was acceptable by modeling those behaviors myself. I taught her that family members existed to solve her problems by solving them for her instead of requiring her to develop independence. And I taught her that consequences were optional by protecting her from them throughout her childhood. Mom, I'm grateful that you're taking responsibility for those patterns, I replied honestly. But I also want you to know that recognizing mistakes is just the first step. Rebuilding trust requires consistent changes in behavior over time. Both of my parents had downsized to a modest apartment and were living within their actual income for the first time in over 3 years. They attended financial planning counseling sessions that taught them budgeting skills and debt management strategies. Most importantly, they were learning to communicate honestly about money instead of using secrecy and manipulation to avoid difficult conversations. We want you to know that we don't expect you to resume financial support or close family relationships, my father said during that same conversation. We understand that we have to earn back your trust through our actions, not our promises. And we understand that you have the right to maintain whatever boundaries feel necessary for your own protection and well-being. Through my volunteer work with the Colorado Financial Abuse Prevention Network, I had found a way to transform my painful experience into meaningful purpose. Teaching workshops about family financial manipulation, supporting other victims of identity theft, and advocating for stronger legal protections had given me a sense of mission that felt deeply fulfilling. Your story helps other people recognize manipulation patterns they might not see clearly in their own families, explained Dr. Sarah Martinez, the network's director. When someone with your education and professional success shares how they were systematically exploited, it validates other victims' experiences and gives them permission to seek help. The workshops also connected me with other survivors who had similar experiences with family financial abuse. Learning that my situation wasn't unique or shameful had been incredibly healing. Understanding that many intelligent, successful people struggle with family manipulation had helped me release guilt and self-blame that had been weighing me down for years. As I finished my morning coffee and prepared for another day at a job I genuinely enjoyed, I reflected on the life lesson that had emerged from the most difficult year of my life. I learned that setting boundaries isn't cruel, it's necessary. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's destruction. When people show you who they really are, believe them the first time. Family isn't about blood, it's about respect, love, and genuine care. I didn't lose a family that day, I cut off their financial support. I freed myself from people who saw me as an ATM instead of a human being. Real love doesn't come with conditions or ultimatums. Healthy relationships don't require one person to sacrifice their financial security or emotional well-being to maintain connection. And sometimes walking away from toxic family dynamics is the only way to discover who you really are when you're not constantly managing other people's crises and emotional demands. The most beautiful part of my new life was the peace. No more midnight phone calls about financial emergencies. No more guilt trips about family loyalty. No more wondering which relatives were being honest versus manipulative. No more anxiety about checking bank statements or credit reports. Instead, I had relationships based on mutual respect work that challenged and fulfilled me financial security that belonged entirely to me, and the deep satisfaction of knowing that I had chosen courage over comfort when faced with the most difficult decision of my life. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own well-being? How did you find the strength to set boundaries with people you loved, even when those boundaries felt uncomfortable or painful? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Your experiences might help someone else who is struggling with similar family dynamics. If this story resonated with you or helped you feel less alone in your own family challenges, please consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear these words. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more stories about overcoming family dysfunction and building healthier relationships. Thank you for listening to my journey from financial manipulation to freedom. I hope my experience encourages you to trust your instincts, protect your boundaries, and never be afraid to choose yourself when the people who claim to love you are actually causing you harm. Remember, you deserve relationships that add value to your life instead of draining it. You deserve to be seen as a whole person, not just a solution to someone else's problems. And you deserve to build a life that reflects your choices, your values, and your dreams. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video.